Welcome back, everybody, on a really overreaction Monday. Hot Mike. Kolpak coming up in a half hour. So great to have our next guest. We've had him on all season long in this time slot, and this is the one I know the day we love to chat about. The day after the bracket comes out, as Sam Herder joins us from Hero Sports, BetMGM. He aced 23 of 24 yesterday, 7 of the 8 seeds. Congrats on that. Who's got the biggest gripe today? That's always what I want to ask. So who's got the right to be the most PO'd this morning?
Yeah, I think overall the bracket for the most part, I think is fine. You know, the seeds and who's in and who's out. There's always some little stuff here or there. I think probably the biggest gripe is Idaho. Being seated at number 8. I kind of question why like a team like UIW would jump Idaho ever since the top 10 reveal in late October. So I think Idaho probably has a big gripe, especially because, assuming they win, which beating Richmond is no guarantee.
Yep.
In the second round, they would have to go back to Bozeman. So that's probably, one fan base that has a big gripe. Speaking of Richmond, I put Richmond in my top 8 seeds. I thought,
as did I,
after how they finished the season and how UIW looked, that Richmond would jump UIW for the number 8 seed. And so when UIW popped up as the 6th seed, that was a little surprising. And then the third one too, and not that it really matters because it was the last 4 out, but I was a little surprised to see Chattanooga in there ahead of Western Carolina.
Yeah.
Again, not that it matters because, it was the bubble and teams that didn't make it, but you would have thought that Western Carolina with the head-to-head over Chattanooga in 7 wins overall, that Western Carolina would be ahead of Chattanooga in that first 4 out order. And Western wasn't even listed in the first 4 out. So not like they would have made the playoffs anyways, but still, I know I had some Western fans kind of questioning like why was Chattanooga ahead of us as far as the consideration.
All right, so we nearly had the doomsday scenario happen with the Bison losing to South Dakota. Granted, Montana State crushed Montana, but if that would have happened, I would have loved to have seen what the committee would have done with that. Granted, it didn't with Montana State winning. So I want to pair through each resume with you on who got seated where. We'll start with NDSU. So NDSU finished 10-2, had 10 Division I wins, 2 road losses by a combined 6 points. They ended up having wins over the Jacks, who made the playoffs, Illinois State, who made the playoffs, and Tennessee State, who made the playoffs. Sam, just give me your overview of their resume and why they should have been the 2.
Yeah, I think if the committee was looking at overall body of work, there was no question that NDSU was the 2 seed. My question was, what was the committee going to factor? Because there's been times when they have looked at overall body of work, and if they leaned that way, then I thought the Bison were the obvious choice for the number 2 seed. But every committee is different. There's like 3 or 4 new members this year.
Right.
And sometimes they look at, well, what have you done for me lately? How did you finish? And then in that case, South Dakota State was rolling teams the last 3 or 4 games, including a couple of ranked teams. Meanwhile, NDSU ended on a loss. And so in my mind, I thought, well, maybe some committee members might, I guess, quote unquote, reward South Dakota State for that finish and put them at the 2 seed. So that was the argument for the Jacks. But if it was just overall body of work and resumes, NDSU has that with more D1 wins, more ranked wins, stronger strength of schedule, head-to-head. And I think even if South Dakota State played Stetson instead of their D2 opponent, I still think NDSU would have been ahead of South Dakota State just because of the number of ranked wins, strength of schedule, and the head-to-head win. But having a D2 win on your resume still doesn't – it counts on your resume, but it doesn't count like as much, I guess, as a D1 win, even though Northern State is probably better than – Stetson, for example. That's just, kind of how it goes.
South Dakota State obviously goes 10-2. They end up having wins over 2 of the top 6 seeds, which that's the Jackrabbit fans kept hammering me with yesterday, Sam. Okay, well, they beat USD and they beat Incarnate Word, 2 of the top 6. And I'm like, that's great. But like you mentioned, they had 2 road losses, lost to the Bison. The loss to Oklahoma State is not, and I know it's not supposed to affect you losing to an FBS, but Oklahoma State won 3 football games. The game with Augie came back to bite them and the Coyotes. You can't do it.
Yeah. I was getting Augie, and I think was it South Dakota that
Played
played
Northern.
Northern
Yes,
State?
correct. Yep.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that hurts your resume. And yeah, South Dakota State had fewer ranked wins as well, but they did have two wins over currently top 10
Right.
teams, compared to, I think NDSU just had the one, which was over South Dakota State. So I'm guessing it was a very late night in the selection room. Matt Larson it seemed like sounded like he lost his voice, just because I'm
Yeah.
sure it was just a very long conversation, not only about the top 3, 4 seeds, but about the bubble as well. So maybe I'll find out like when exactly they finished the bracket. It was maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, who knows? But I don't think it was a slam dunk. Like, okay, NDSU is the 2 seed. Okay, cool. I'm guessing there was a pretty good
Yep.
discussion, but at the end of the day, if the committee members went off of overall body of work, NDSU's overall body of work was no doubt the number 2 seed.
South Dakota ends up getting the 4, and the Coyotes obviously 9-2. And we talked about this the day after it happened. You were on the show when the game with Portland State got canceled. You and I both said this is going to be monstrous. It has the potential to really mess with them, and obviously it did, Sam.
Yeah, and one team too, that might have a gripe as well is UC Davis, because I mean
Yep.
we kind of figured, okay, 1 through 4 will be Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and South Dakota, but UC Davis is sitting there going, well, we have we have more Division I wins than South
Correct.
Dakota. We have one
Yep.
more ranked win. Strength of schedules were kind of on par. I think South Dakota was 8, UC Davis 15. But at the same time, you probably can't push South Dakota all the way back to the 5 seed after they just
Just
beat
beat the Bison. Right.
North Dakota State. And for a little bit Saturday night, like not very long, but for like 5 minutes, I almost convinced myself, well, maybe South Dakota should be the 2 seed,
2.
not because of overall body of work,
Yeah.
but the committee could just say, well, we have to put South Dakota as the 2 seed. But then I was started thinking about it more. I'm like, no, they're probably going to go down to the 4 seed. And yeah, the Portland State cancellation, that hurts. The scheduling the D2, that hurts. And then also just not the bet, because they didn't play Illinois State. I don't think they didn't play Missouri
They
State.
did not.
So
Nope.
again, none of that is the fault of USD, but that's just 2 fewer opportunities at ranked wins. And yeah, sometimes the committee will look at overall body of work. Sometimes they'll look at head to head, and it's all up to the individuals. I mean, 8 of the committee members could look at overall body of work. 2 committee members could have said, well, South Dakota has the best head to head. And maybe 2 committee members voted South Dakota for number 2. We don't know it. It all comes down to voting point totals. But yeah, I think South Dakota maybe has a gripe, being at the 4 seed, but yeah, 8, fewer ranked wins, fewer D1 wins probably knock them back a little bit.
The overarching theme, and I tweeted this out, I think you would agree with me, is going forward. I know the Bison had, you'll remember this. I think you were in school when this happened, when Montana State bailed on the Bison 6 months before their football game, before the 2013 season. And Gene Taylor, I'll never forget the old BSA, how furious he was on it. And they had to go schedule Ferris State. Now, that Bison team of 2013 was an all-time team, maybe the greatest FCS team we've ever seen. So them playing a D2 didn't affect them. But the lesson was learned then from NDSU. We're never going to do this again. And South Dakota State and USD, I get it. It was great for their fan bases that they had in-state schools. They learned a hard lesson, I think, yesterday, Sam. You can't do this anymore.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of things maybe played into that, with it being a 12-game season. I mean, you kind of had an option if you wanted to play that 12th game.
Right.
And some teams honestly didn't play a 12th game. They just stayed at 11 games. And so I think part of it was, well, it's a 12-game season. There were some game cancellations that kind of forced South Dakota State and South Dakota to schedule a D2. But I don't know like how hard they work the phones to try and get a D1 in there as well. Like Montana State kind of, I don't want to say got lucky, but they had SFA pullouts of their scheduled game this season, and then Mercyhurst jumped into Division I, and so Montana State was able to
on the phone with them.
Get on the phone with them and say, hey, would you want to come out here? We'll pay you a few $100,000, whatever it was. So they got a D1 win on their resume. But again, the tricky thing is, would Augie beat Mercyhurst? Probably. So that's the thing where non-D1 wins, they count on your resume, but your number of D1 wins also counts probably even more on your resume. And so, and like I said, even if South Dakota State played Mercyhurst, I still think North Dakota State would have been the 2 seed, just because of the more ranked wins and the head-to-head stronger strength of schedule. But yeah, having a non-D1 win on your resume certainly knocks you back a little bit in some cases.
Well, let's look at the bracket here overall. On the Bison side of things, obviously NDSU's the 2. Mercer ends up being seeded 7th. The Word is 6th. The Jacks are 3rd. You've obviously got the potential of a NDSU SDSU semifinal. We've done this before. Could be electric, Sam. It just could be. And I know Jimmy Rogers said it and the post-game press conference after the game in October. So we fully expect we're going to see these guys again, whether it's here, our place, or in Frisco. And he basically echoed it again yesterday during the selection show.
Yeah, and at the time, I was kind of thinking, well, NDSU is probably going to be the 1 seed, Montana State will be the 2 seed, South Dakota State will be the 3 seed, and so well, if you see NDSU again, it probably won't be in the Fargo Dome. It'll be potentially in Frisco, but things just worked out this way, and it's kind of interesting too that like a good chunk of South Dakota State's fan base is obviously like upset, thinking they should have been the 2 seed. But at the same time, I think they have, a level of confidence that, okay, if we have to go to the Fargo Dome again and get a win, like we can do that. We came up just short earlier this year, but South Dakota State has won the Fargo Dome before. So obviously you would love to have that game in Brookings, but honestly, if I'm South Dakota State, I would rather go to NDSU in the semifinals than go to Bozeman in the semifinals, just because you're more comfortable in the Fargo Dome. And I think winning in Bozeman, especially this year, is going to be very, very tough. And the thing too to keep in mind is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think if South Dakota State gets to the semifinals, Mark Gronowski will have tied Easton Stick for the career wins, which means he has to beat NDSU to break that record. Yep. So just a little more added, incentive in that game, maybe. So that could be a fantastic atmosphere.
Is there any way that this gets upset the apple cart? You look at that side of the bracket. Can anybody throw a wrench in the plans of making the semifinals, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I mean, South Dakota State would have to go through Montana, most likely Montana, who we'll see what Tennessee State can do. Yeah. UIW is probably going to be the quarterfinal matchup for South Dakota State. That'll be a rematch, but in the cold and the snow, you favor South Dakota State there. NDSU won't have a problem in the second round, I don't think. NDSU versus Mercer, the Bison will win that, but is it going to be a blowout, or is it going to be in like a Samford type of game a couple of years ago, where it's kind of close in the first half there before NDSU pulls away? That'll be an interesting gauge for Mercer, because Mercer's front seven I think is pretty good, but their pass defense isn't very good. So it's hard to see anyone knocking off South Dakota State or North Dakota State before the semifinal game. So it looks like we will see Bison Jacks in the semifinals, as long as they handle business, and that could be. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that could be maybe the biggest South Dakota State, North Dakota State matchup we've ever had. Well, in Frisco a couple of years ago, that might take the cake, but this one will be a close second, I think.
We could be prisoners of the moment. On the other side, obviously South Dakota gets the 4. You mentioned Davis there. Got a potential of Idaho, Montana State, which granted they played earlier, and the Bobcats rolled the Vandals in that game in Bozeman. Can we see an upset on this side? Can Davis go to Vermilion? I think that'd be a heck of a ball game. Davis has got some talent. Can they go to Vermilion and win? Will be the question in that quarterfinal round.
Yeah, I think that would be a fantastic game. South Dakota has a really front seven, obviously, going up against Land Larison and the running back for UC Davis, who could be a top 5 Walter Payton Award type of finalist. And so I think that could be a really great matchup and a good test for South Dakota. I could see that one going either way. And Montana State probably has the easiest path to the semifinals and even to Frisco, which as it should be with the number 1 seed.
Correct.
And now we get that, with the number 16 seed being forced into the number 1 seed. So it's hard to see Montana State getting upset until the semifinals, and even then, like UC Davis going to Bozeman, South Dakota going to Bozeman, I think would probably run into a buzzsaw. I'm really interested in Richmond going to Idaho. Richmond has to beat Lehigh first, which they probably should, but number 9 Richmond going to number 8 Idaho, I think could be a really, really good game in the second round.
I just seeing the seeds at 16, Sam, was just like, why have we not done this for so long? Like, why did it take so long for us to get here? Because now you have a true national tournament. As I look at the bracket, like, this is fantastic. This is what we should have.
Yeah, it makes it so much less regionalized as well, because I mean they could have put Montana going to Montana State in the second round if it was last year, but now they have, they have potentially New Hampshire going all the way across the country to Montana State. They have Richmond going all the way across the country to Idaho, and so yeah, I mean the NCAA is going to eat some more costs here, flying teams across the country, but I don't think the NCAA is short on any money, and plus they have the new TV deal as well, which is like 4 times higher than the previous TV deal, which women's basketball has helped with that. But hey, that'll help fund travel for wrestling and FCS football and all that. So they have the money to fly these teams all over the place, and it looks like a much better looking bracket than in previous years.
Last thing before I let you go, who's on upset alert this weekend of a seed that could get beat at home?
Well, I was gonna say SEMO Illinois State, but then you said at home, so that I don't know. That'll be interesting there with Illinois State going on the road. I think just going down the list here, Northern Arizona going to Abilene Christian, I think could be pretty interesting as well. I'm really curious about Tennessee State going to Montana. I don't think it'd be an upset, but depending on the weather, I think Tennessee State, offensively is kind of looking really good. Tennessee State's defensive line, has looked good. I know against the Bison, they didn't look great at all.
Hey, it's night and day, man. I really like their team, and Eddie George did a heck of a job. Heck, they won 9 games this year. That's a great year they had.
Yep. So he's turned things around, and they're looking pretty strong. I was happy to see them get into the playoffs as an at-large bid. So we'll see what they can do see what they can do at Montana. That could potentially be a closer game than expected. Because remember, 2 years ago, we all thought Montana would roll SEMO.
Correct.
And SEMO was up like 3 scores at one point before Montana came back and won that game. Then I think the Grizz went to NDSU.
That's right. Next week.
If I got my ears correct. So, I think that'll be a good game. And, hey, it's on ESPN too as well. So, national television for a first-round game. That's happened a couple of times before, maybe just once before. But that could be a fun one potentially.
It's great to see it. Great job on the bracket as always. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk next week. We'll recap the first round, all right?
All right, you as well. Thank you.
Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday at 9:30. We'll break here. We'll wrap up hour 1. Kolpak waiting in the wings. We got a bunch of emails to get to as Overreaction Monday rolls on. Back on Hot Mic. We're moving fast here. We're back after this.